Okay, so you want to buy North Korea. Think about what you're actually getting. 26 million people, mountains packed with coal, iron, and rare earth minerals, a military that fires missiles into the Pacific for attention, and a leader who, by most intelligence estimates, is sitting on somewhere between $5 and $15 billion in personal wealth, while running a country where the average citizen earns around $1,246 a year. That gap is not an accident, and by the end of this video, you're going to understand exactly how it works. Because North Korea isn't a failing state. It's one of the most perfectly engineered extraction machines ever built. The country doesn't exist to serve its population. It exists to harvest it, and the people at the very top are the only ones who ever see the profit. Here's what we're going to break down. First, the revenue, where the money actually comes from in a country that can barely feed itself. Then, the system, the machinery that guarantees the regime always wins no matter what. Then, the trap, how they keep 26 million people locked inside it. And finally, the number that puts all of it into perspective. There's one thing I want you to hold on to as we go through this. The most important revenue stream, the one that changed everything for the Kim regime, I'm saving for last. Because once you understand it, the whole picture clicks. Let's start with the paradox, because it's genuinely strange. North Korea has nuclear weapons. It has ballistic missiles that can reach the continental United States. It has a fleet of luxury cars, private jets, and at least one $7 million yacht docked near a private compound. Kim is believed to own over 15 palatial residences, some equipped with golf courses, private lakes, and underground bunkers. And yet, this is a country where frequent weather-related crop failures have aggravated chronic food shortages caused by a lack of arable land, collective farming, poor soil quality, and persistent shortages of tractors and fuel. How does a country that can't grow enough food afford a nuclear program? The answer is that it runs on money it takes from other people. And there are a few very specific pipelines for that. The second strongest one, and the one most people actually know about, is the smuggling operation. North Korea sits on enormous natural resources: coal, seafood, iron ore, minerals. And despite sweeping international sanctions that are supposed to block exports, those resources keep moving. Ship-to-ship transfers in international waters, falsified cargo manifests, front companies in China. The regime found every crack in the sanctions architecture and built a business through it. North Korea's economy started to significantly improve during the mid-2020s, aided by arms sales to Russia and expanding trade with China. From the summer of 2023 to the end of 2025, arms sales to Russia generated more than $10 billion for North Korea. That's not a side hustle, that's a primary revenue line. Then there's the Overseas Labor Program, which is the one that should make you genuinely uncomfortable. The regime sends its own citizens abroad to Russia, China, Gulf construction sites, seafood processing plants, and those workers send money home. Except they don't really. The state takes it. Workers receive only a fraction of the money paid to the DPRK government for their work, and face punishment if they fail to meet production or work targets. The government withholds up to 90% of wages from overseas workers. Workers also reported confiscated passports, restricted movement, harsh surveillance, and 12 to 14-hour work days. Think about what that actually is. It's a human export program. The state packages its own citizens as labor, ships them abroad, collects almost everything they earn, and sends them back with almost nothing. The government withholds up to 90% of wages from overseas workers, who generate annual revenue for the DPRK government of hundreds of millions of dollars. Now, here's where it gets genuinely wild. world. And this is the one I told you to hold on to. The third revenue stream, the one the regime has quietly turned into its most sophisticated financial operation, is cybercrime, and the scale of it is almost hard to believe. DPRK-linked actors stole $2.02 billion in 2025 alone, a 51% year-on-year increase, pushing their all-time cumulative total to $6.75 billion. There is a state-sponsored hacking unit called the Lazarus Group. It's a state-sponsored hacker group alleged to be run by the government of North Korea, and they operate more like a financial institution than a criminal gang. North Korea's state-sponsored cryptocurrency theft program has become one of the most operationally significant financial crime threats facing the crypto industry. It is not a periodic problem or a series of isolated incidents. It is a sustained campaign run by a sanctioned government that has made cryptocurrency theft a structural component of its revenue model. The single biggest score so far. On February 21st, 2025, the North Korean-linked Lazarus Group used a sophisticated attack on one of Bybit's cold wallets and made away with over $1.5 billion worth of cryptocurrency in one day, one operation, and the UN panel of experts has estimated that crypto theft funds a material proportion of North Korea's ballistic missile and nuclear weapons development programs. So let's recap the revenue side. Sanctioned commodity exports, overseas labor trafficking, weapons sales, and a state hacking operation that stole more than $2 billion last year alone. The question is, how does all of that money stay at the top? Why doesn't any of it filter down? That's where the system comes in, and the system is airtight. It starts with something called Songbun. North Korea uses Songbun, a socio-political classification system that ranks people based on perceived loyalty to the Kim family. Those in lower classes face discrimination in employment, housing, healthcare, and education. Your Songbun is determined by your family's history, whether your ancestors collaborated with Japan, whether anyone in your family has ever defected, whether you've shown sufficient loyalty to the regime, and it determines almost everything about your life. Where you can live, what job you can get, whether your kids go to university. It's a behavioral leash built into the social structure. Obedience is the only path to a better life. But Songbun alone doesn't explain the economics. The deeper mechanism is total state ownership. In North Korea, the state owns the means of production. There is no stock market, property rights, or banking system. There is no private enterprise in any meaningful sense. Every factory, every mine, every farm routes back to the state. So when a citizen works, and they work hard because not working has consequences, the value they produce flows upward. It doesn't accumulate for them. Workers contribute labor to produce goods and services in North Korea for free or at a highly discounted rate. This should be interpreted as a hidden tax on labor where the worker's time is redirected by the state, causing the worker to lose earning potential while the state collects returns on the worker's outputs. And just in case anyone found a way around that, just in case some ordinary North Korean managed to build up a little savings through the informal markets, the regime demonstrated in 2009 exactly what they thought about that. In late 2009, North Korea revalued its currency, effectively confiscating all privately held money above the equivalent of $35 per person. The revaluation effectively wiped out the savings of many North Koreans. Days after the revaluation, the won dropped 96% against the United States dollar. Over overnight, no warning, whatever you had saved, gone. The man who oversaw it, Pak Namgi, the director of the Planning and Finance Department, was blamed for the disaster and later executed in 2010, which tells you something about how the regime handles accountability when it points inward. So the House always wins, not because they're lucky, because they designed the game so that every possible path a citizen could take still routes money back to the top. Now, the question you're probably asking is, why don't people just leave? And this is where the trap closes. The information environment inside North Korea is total. There is no open internet. State media is the only media, and the surveillance is constant. A 2025 report from the United Nations Office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights found the North Korean government increased surveillance, censorship, forced labor, and severe punishments over the past decade, with authorities maintaining total control of the population, and it goes further than just watching people. The law criminalizes defection and attempted defection, and individuals, including children, who cross the border for the purpose of defecting or seeking asylum are subject to a minimum of 5 years of reform through labor. In serious cases, the government subjects asylum seekers to indefinite terms of imprisonment and forced labor, confiscation of property, or death. The isolation isn't a side effect of the regime's paranoia, it's the mechanism. If citizens don't know that other countries exist where people own property, accumulate savings, and choose their own work, they can't want those things. And if they can't want those things, they can't organize around them. The extraction keeps working because the people being extracted from have no frame of reference for anything different. If you're finding this as wild as I do, drop a comment below. I want to know what surprised you most. And if you want to go even deeper on how authoritarian economies actually function, the next video is going to hit hard. But first, let's get to the number, because the number is the whole point. At the top of this system, you have Kim Jong-un. His net worth is estimated at $5 to $10 billion as of early 2026, mainly from state-controlled assets, foreign currency reserves, luxury goods, and slush funds. He gains wealth from North Korea's natural resources, arms sales, cybercrime, and smuggling activities. Kim also controls money in overseas accounts, owns luxury assets, and manages secret funds through front companies. At the bottom of that same system, you have the average North Korean citizen. South Korea's central bank estimated that the average yearly per capita income in North Korea in 2024 was around $1,246. That's roughly $3.40 a day. And that number doesn't even capture the full extraction, because the biggest deficiency in measuring North Korea's economy is the inability to properly account for the state procuring goods and services without payment or at a fraction of the cost. Because the North Korean regime does not disclose reliable information on its economy and resorts to widespread extraction of labor, conventional economic thinking cannot be applied to assess its economic reality. So on one end, you have a man with somewhere between $5 and $10 billion, 20 palaces, a private yacht, and a nuclear arsenal. On the other end, you have 26 million people earning an average of $3 a day with no property rights, no savings that can't be confiscated overnight, and no legal way out. That gap, that staggering engineered gap, is not a failure of the North Korean economy. It is the North Korean economy working exactly as designed. The paradox we started with: how does a country that can't feed its people still fund nuclear weapons and luxury imports? Turns out not to be a paradox at all. The population population isn't the beneficiary of the economy. The population is the input. Every hour worked, every wage confiscated abroad, every mineral pulled from the ground, every crypto wallet drained by a state hacker. It all flows in one direction. And the House never loses because the House wrote every rule, controls every exit, and owns every chip on the table. If this video changed how you think about what a country actually is and who it's actually built for, share it with someone who should see it. And if you want to understand how the next authoritarian economy operates, the video right there is exactly where to go next.